Question 1. Performance analysis shows that a critical construction phase is consistently taking longer than initially projected, impacting overall project timelines. The team has identified several potential reasons for this delay, ranging from material delivery inconsistencies to suboptimal sequencing of tasks. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate initial step to address this performance gap? Option A. Implement a new, unproven project management software system to improve task tracking and communication, hoping it will streamline operations. Option B. Focus solely on expediting material deliveries, as this is a frequently cited cause of construction delays, without investigating other potential process issues. Option C. Immediately reallocate additional labor resources to the tasks experiencing delays, assuming that increased manpower will accelerate progress. Option D. Conduct a detailed process mapping exercise to visualize the current workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and analyze task dependencies within the delayed phase. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed process mapping exercise to visualize the current workflow, identify specific bottlenecks, and analyze task dependencies within the delayed phase. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in project management, where initial performance metrics indicate a deviation from planned efficiency. The professional challenge lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause of the underperformance and selecting the most appropriate intervention strategy without disrupting ongoing operations or compromising quality. It requires a nuanced understanding of process optimization principles and their practical application within a construction context, considering factors like resource allocation, workflow dependencies, and potential external influences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to identify specific bottlenecks or inefficiencies within the current construction process. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing data-driven decision-making and targeted solutions. It reflects a commitment to continuous improvement, a core tenet of process optimization, and ensures that resources are directed towards addressing the actual problems, rather than implementing generic or potentially disruptive changes. This methodical approach minimizes risk and maximizes the likelihood of achieving desired performance improvements. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad, unverified change without a thorough diagnosis is professionally unsound. It risks introducing new problems, wasting resources, and failing to address the actual cause of underperformance. This approach demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and can lead to operational disruptions, potentially impacting project timelines and budgets. Furthermore, making significant changes without understanding their impact on interconnected processes can violate principles of good project management and operational efficiency. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured problem-solving framework. This typically involves 1. Defining the problem clearly based on performance data. 2. Gathering more detailed information to understand the underlying causes, e.g., through observation, interviews, process mapping. 3. Identifying and evaluating potential solutions, considering their feasibility, impact, and alignment with project goals. 4. Implementing the chosen solution in a controlled manner, with mechanisms for monitoring and adjustment. 5. Reviewing the results and documenting lessons learned for future projects. This iterative process ensures that interventions are effective, efficient, and sustainable. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical path activity on a major infrastructure project is experiencing significant delays. To address this, the project management team is considering several strategies to optimize the workflow and recover lost time. Which of the following strategies best aligns with a holistic approach to process optimization in a regulated construction environment? Option A. Conducting a thorough root cause analysis of the delays, involving input from site supervisors and workers, and proposing phase changes that are reviewed for safety and regulatory compliance before implementation. Option B. Implementing a new, unproven technology that promises faster execution, without extensive prior testing or consultation with the site safety team. Option C. Rushing the remaining tasks in the critical path by increasing overtime hours for the existing workforce, without reassessing the potential for burnout or increased accident risk. Option D. Relying on the experience of a single senior engineer to unilaterally decide on and implement process modifications, bypassing formal review procedures. Correct answer is B. implementing a new, unproven technology that promises faster execution, without extensive prior testing or consultation with the site safety team. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a need to optimize a construction project's workflow. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency gains with adherence to established safety protocols and regulatory compliance, which are paramount in the construction industry. Misjudging the impact of process changes on safety or regulatory adherence can lead to significant legal repercussions, project delays, and reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and collaborative method for process improvement. This involves thoroughly analyzing existing workflows, identifying bottlenecks through objective observation and feedback, and then proposing solutions that are vetted for their impact on safety, quality, and regulatory compliance. Engaging all stakeholders, including site personnel and safety officers, ensures that proposed changes are practical, safe, and legally sound, aligning with the principles of responsible project management and the overarching goals of Bouygues' operational standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering safety implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for regulatory requirements concerning worker safety and site management, potentially leading to accidents and non-compliance with health and safety legislation. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper consultation would be ethically flawed. This bypasses the due diligence required to ensure changes are effective and do not introduce unforeseen risks, violating principles of responsible decision-making and potentially leading to project inefficiencies or safety hazards. A third incorrect approach that overlooks the need for documentation and post-implementation review would also be professionally deficient. This lack of systematic tracking and evaluation hinders continuous improvement and makes it difficult to demonstrate compliance or learn from the process, failing to uphold best practices in project management and quality assurance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of project objectives and constraints. This involves a comprehensive assessment of the current process, followed by the generation of multiple potential solutions. Each solution must then be rigorously evaluated against key criteria: safety, regulatory compliance, cost-effectiveness, quality, and impact on project timelines. Stakeholder consultation is crucial at each stage to gather diverse perspectives and ensure buy-in. Finally, a pilot testing phase and a robust post-implementation review process are essential for validating the effectiveness of the chosen approach and facilitating ongoing optimization. Question 3. Analysis of potential process optimization strategies for a large-scale construction project. Which approach best aligns with ensuring both operational efficiency and adherence to Bouygues' commitment to quality and safety standards? Option A. Adopting a lean manufacturing philosophy without a detailed assessment of its applicability to the specific complexities of the construction site and its potential impact on safety protocols. Option B. Introducing a blanket reduction in on-site inspection frequency across all project phases to cut down on labor costs associated with quality assurance. Option C. Expediting material procurement by bypassing standard quality control checks to reduce lead times and accelerate construction schedules. Option D. Implementing a new digital workflow management system after a thorough analysis of current inefficiencies and a pilot testing phase to ensure seamless integration and user adoption. The correct answer is D. Implementing a new digital workflow management system after a thorough analysis of current inefficiencies and a pilot testing phase to ensure seamless integration and user adoption. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in project management, balancing the need for efficiency with the imperative to maintain quality and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that yield tangible benefits without compromising the integrity of the project or violating established regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial changes and genuine optimizations that address root causes of inefficiency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and data-driven methodology for process optimization. This involves understanding the current state, identifying bottlenecks, and evaluating potential solutions against defined criteria, including adherence to Bouygues' internal guidelines and any relevant industry standards or regulations that might apply to construction projects. This methodical approach ensures that improvements are sustainable, measurable, and aligned with strategic objectives, thereby fostering a culture of continuous improvement and operational excellence. It also demonstrates a commitment to responsible project execution, which is ethically sound and professionally expected. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on quality or safety would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to regulatory breaches if safety standards are compromised, or ethical failures if the quality of work is knowingly degraded. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes without proper stakeholder consultation or risk assessment could lead to project delays, increased costs, and reputational damage, all of which are professionally detrimental. Furthermore, adopting a one-size-fits-all solution without tailoring it to the specific context of the Bouygues project would be a failure in professional diligence, potentially overlooking unique project requirements or constraints. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the existing processes and their performance metrics. This should be followed by a diagnostic phase to identify areas for improvement. Considering both efficiency and effectiveness, potential solutions should then be evaluated based on their feasibility, impact, cost-benefit analysis, and alignment with regulatory and ethical standards. Pilot testing and phased implementation, coupled with continuous monitoring and feedback, are crucial for ensuring successful process optimization. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and contribute positively to project outcomes and organizational goals. Question 4. Upon reviewing the initial project plan for a new infrastructure development, a project manager identifies several potential issues that could impact timelines and budget. Which of the following represents the most effective approach to managing these identified risks? Option A. Systematically identify potential risks, analyze their likelihood and impact, and develop specific mitigation strategies for each. Option B. Focus only on risks that have already begun to manifest as problems during the project's early stages. Option C. Document all identified risks, but defer the development of mitigation plans until issues begin to arise during project execution. Option D. Dismiss any identified risks that appear to have a low probability of occurring without further analysis of their potential consequences. The correct answer is A. Systematically identify potential risks, analyze their likelihood and impact, and develop specific mitigation strategies for each. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment beyond simple identification. The challenge lies in distinguishing between a superficial acknowledgement of risk and a robust, actionable assessment that informs strategic decision-making. The pressure to deliver a project on time and within budget can create a temptation to downplay or overlook potential risks, making objective and thorough risk assessment critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with best professional practice as mandated by general project management principles, and implicitly by regulatory frameworks that expect due diligence and prudent management of potential adverse events. A thorough risk assessment ensures that potential problems are anticipated, allowing for proactive measures to be taken, thereby safeguarding project objectives and stakeholder interests. This systematic approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible project execution and adherence to standards of care expected in the industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves focusing solely on risks that have already materialized. This is a reactive rather than proactive stance, failing to meet the fundamental requirement of risk assessment, which is to anticipate future uncertainties. It represents a significant ethical and professional failure, as it neglects the duty to identify and manage potential threats before they cause harm, potentially leading to project failure and financial loss. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss risks that seem improbable without a formal analysis of their potential impact. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an over-reliance on subjective judgment. While some risks may have low probability, their potential impact could be catastrophic. Failing to assess this impact is a professional failing that could expose the project and the organization to unacceptable levels of exposure, contravening principles of sound governance and risk management. A further incorrect approach is to document risks but fail to develop any corresponding mitigation plans. This renders the risk assessment process largely ineffective. Identifying a risk without planning how to manage it is a superficial exercise that does not fulfill the professional obligation to actively manage potential threats. It suggests a lack of commitment to proactive problem solving and can be seen as a dereliction of duty, as the identified risks remain unaddressed and capable of derailing the project. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first establishing a clear framework for identification, analysis, and response. This involves actively seeking input from all relevant stakeholders, utilizing a variety of tools and techniques for risk identification, and employing a structured methodology for assessing likelihood and impact. The decision-making process should prioritize objectivity, thoroughness, and a forward-looking perspective. When faced with potential risks, professionals must ask, what could go wrong? How likely is it? What would be the consequences? And what can we do about it? This iterative process ensures that risk management is an integral part of project planning and execution, rather than an afterthought. Question 5. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of project delays and budget overruns on several major construction projects. From a stakeholder perspective, what is the most appropriate initial response to address these performance issues? Option A. Publicly attribute the performance shortfalls to unforeseen market conditions and external economic factors to manage stakeholder expectations and protect the company's immediate reputation. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of project management methodologies, risk assessment protocols, and supply chain performance to identify systemic causes for the delays and overruns, while engaging with key stakeholders to communicate findings and propose solutions. Option C. Focus on individual performance reviews of project teams, identifying specific individuals responsible for the delays and implementing disciplinary actions to deter future occurrences. Option D. Immediately implement stricter cost-cutting measures across all departments and reassign project managers to less critical roles to signal a strong response to the performance issues. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of project management methodologies, risk assessment protocols, and supply chain performance to identify systemic causes for the delays and overruns, while engaging with key stakeholders to communicate findings and propose solutions. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in project delays and cost overruns across several key infrastructure projects managed by Bouygues. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the company's reputation, financial health, and its ability to secure future contracts. Stakeholders, including clients, investors, and employees, will be scrutinizing the reasons for these issues and demanding accountability. The core challenge lies in identifying the root causes of these performance shortfalls and implementing effective corrective actions while adhering to the Bouygues hiring assessment tests implied regulatory and ethical standards, which would likely align with general principles of good corporate governance, contract law, and professional conduct expected in the construction and engineering sector. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, data-driven investigation into the project management processes, supply chain reliability, and resource allocation. This requires engaging with project teams to understand on-the-ground challenges, reviewing contractual obligations and client communications, and assessing the effectiveness of risk management strategies. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, accountability, and a commitment to continuous improvement. It aligns with ethical obligations to deliver projects to agreed standards and contractual terms, and regulatory expectations for sound financial management and project oversight. By focusing on systemic issues rather than individual blame, it fosters a culture of learning and prevents recurrence. An incorrect approach would be to immediately attribute the delays and cost overruns to external factors without thorough investigation. It fails to acknowledge Bouygues' responsibility in project planning, execution, and oversight. Such an approach could lead to a lack of internal corrective actions, potentially violating contractual obligations to clients and misrepresenting the company's performance to investors. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on punitive measures against project managers without understanding the underlying systemic issues. This not only demoralizes the workforce, but also fails to address the root causes, leading to continued performance problems and potential breaches of employment law or ethical guidelines regarding fair treatment of employees. A third incorrect approach might be to downplay the severity of the issues to stakeholders, which constitutes a failure of transparency and could lead to regulatory scrutiny for misleading reporting and a breach of trust with clients and investors. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with acknowledging the reported performance issues. This involves gathering all relevant data, conducting a thorough root cause analysis, consulting with relevant internal and external stakeholders, and developing a clear action plan with measurable outcomes. This process should be guided by principles of integrity, diligence, and a commitment to fulfilling contractual and ethical responsibilities. Question 6. Research into the Bouygues hiring assessment test context. If a project manager is faced with a community group raising significant environmental concerns about a new construction project that could lead to substantial additional costs for mitigation measures, what is the most professionally responsible approach to managing this stakeholder relationship? Option A. Proactively engage with the community group to understand their specific concerns, assess the validity of their claims, and explore potential mitigation strategies that balance project objectives with environmental protection and community well-being. Option B. Proceed with the project as planned, relying solely on the company's legal compliance and assuming that any opposition can be managed through legal channels if it arises. Option C. Offer a superficial engagement with the community group, providing minimal information and assurances without a genuine commitment to addressing their concerns. Option D. Dismiss the community group's concerns as purely financial obstacles that would jeopardize the project's profitability and proceed with the original project plan. The correct answer is A. Proactively engage with the community group to understand their specific concerns, assess the validity of their claims, and explore potential mitigation strategies that balance project objectives with environmental protection and community well-being. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a project manager must balance the immediate financial interests of the company with the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations of its operations. The pressure to deliver a project within budget and on time can create a conflict with the need to engage with stakeholders who may have differing priorities or concerns. Ignoring or downplaying the input of a significant community group, even if their demands seem costly or inconvenient, risks reputational damage, regulatory scrutiny, and potential project delays or even cancellation due to opposition. Careful judgment is required to assess the legitimacy of concerns and find a path that aligns with both business objectives and stakeholder expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes proactive and inclusive stakeholder engagement. This aligns with best professional practice by fostering transparency, building trust, and seeking collaborative solutions. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach demonstrates a commitment to corporate social responsibility, which is increasingly expected and sometimes mandated by regulatory frameworks. Engaging with the community group to understand their concerns and explore mitigation strategies, even if it incurs additional costs, can prevent larger, more costly problems down the line, such as legal challenges, negative publicity, or community opposition that halts the project. This proactive stance is often a key component of responsible project management and aligns with principles of good governance and ethical business conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the community group's concerns as purely financial obstacles. This fails to acknowledge the potential legal, ethical, and reputational risks associated with ignoring legitimate stakeholder grievances. It can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the concerns touch upon environmental, social, or planning regulations, and it breaches ethical obligations to consider the impact of business activities on affected parties. Another incorrect approach is to offer a superficial engagement without genuine intent to address the concerns. This can be perceived as tokenism and may further erode trust, leading to increased animosity and potentially more organized opposition. Ethically, it is deceptive and fails to uphold the principle of good faith in stakeholder relations. It also risks violating guidelines that emphasize meaningful consultation. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the project without any further engagement, assuming the company's legal rights are sufficient. This is a high-risk strategy that disregards the broader stakeholder perspective and the potential for significant indirect costs, such as reputational damage and loss of social license to operate. It may comply with minimum legal requirements, but fails to meet the higher standards of ethical conduct and responsible business practice expected in modern project management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and understanding their interests and potential impact. This should be followed by a risk assessment that considers not only financial, but also reputational, legal, and social risks. The next step involves developing a stakeholder engagement plan that outlines how and when to communicate and consult. When concerns are raised, the process should involve active listening, objective assessment of the concerns, and exploration of mutually beneficial solutions. This iterative process of engagement, assessment, and adaptation is crucial for successful and responsible project delivery. Question 7. System analysis indicates that a significant investor in a new infrastructure project managed by Bouygues is expressing concerns about the project's potential long-term environmental impact, suggesting that a more cost-effective, albeit less environmentally friendly, construction method should be adopted to maximize immediate returns. As a project manager, how should you best address this situation? Adhering strictly to UK Financial Services Regulation and SISI guidelines. Option A. Immediately approve the adoption of the less environmentally friendly construction method to satisfy the investor's demand for higher short-term returns, assuming that regulatory scrutiny on environmental impact will be minimal in the project's initial phase. Option B. Initiate a detailed review of the project's environmental impact assessment. Engage with the investor to understand their specific concerns and financial objectives, and explore alternative construction methods that balance cost-effectiveness with environmental sustainability, presenting a comprehensive proposal that addresses both aspects. Option C. Inform the investor that the project's financial projections have already been finalized, and that any changes to the construction method would negatively impact profitability, advising them to focus on the agreed-upon financial targets. Option D. Prepare a report highlighting the potential environmental risks but recommend proceeding with the less environmentally friendly method, arguing that the investor's satisfaction is paramount for future funding opportunities, without further investigation into mitigation strategies. The correct answer is B. Initiate a detailed review of the project's environmental impact assessment. Engage with the investor to understand their specific concerns and financial objectives, and explore alternative construction methods that balance cost-effectiveness with environmental sustainability, presenting a comprehensive proposal that addresses both aspects. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a key stakeholder, the investor, with the long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the company, particularly concerning its environmental impact and regulatory compliance. The pressure to prioritize short-term gains over responsible practices can lead to significant reputational damage and legal repercussions if not handled judiciously. Careful judgment is required to identify solutions that are both commercially viable and ethically sound, adhering strictly to the Bouygues hiring assessment test specified regulatory framework, which we will assume for this context is UK Financial Services Regulation and SISI guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to responsible investment and stakeholder engagement, aligning with the principles of sustainable finance and corporate social responsibility. By seeking to understand the investor's concerns while also advocating for environmentally sound practices, the professional acts as a fiduciary, considering the broader impact of investment decisions. This aligns with SISI Ethical Code, which emphasizes integrity, diligence, and acting in the best interests of clients and the wider market, including considering environmental, social, and governance-esque factors. UK regulations increasingly mandate consideration of ESG risks and opportunities, making this approach compliant and forward-thinking. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the investor's immediate profit demands without due diligence on environmental risks fails to uphold the duty of care and diligence expected of financial professionals. This could lead to regulatory breaches if the investment, despite short-term gains, exposes the company or its clients to undisclosed environmental liabilities or non-compliance with emerging ESG disclosure requirements under UK law. Another incorrect approach, which dismisses the investor's concerns outright without proper investigation, demonstrates a lack of professional courtesy and an unwillingness to engage with legitimate stakeholder feedback, potentially damaging client relationships and overlooking material risks. A third incorrect approach, which involves making unsubstantiated claims about the environmental benefits of the project to appease the investor, constitutes misrepresentation and could lead to regulatory sanctions for misleading communications, violating principles of honesty and transparency. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that includes ESG factors, open and honest communication with all stakeholders, and a commitment to finding solutions that balance financial objectives with ethical and regulatory responsibilities. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape, consulting with relevant experts, e.g., environmental consultants, and developing a clear rationale for proposed actions that can be communicated effectively to all parties. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a major infrastructure project is experiencing significant cost overruns due to unforeseen ground conditions. The project team is under pressure to deliver the project within the original budget. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and compliant approach to managing this situation? Option A. Engage a third-party consultant to conduct an independent review of the cost overruns and propose solutions, without disclosing the full extent of the internal pressures to the consultant. Option B. Immediately implement cost-saving measures that may involve reducing the quality of certain non-critical materials and expediting certain construction phases, while deferring detailed communication with stakeholders until a revised budget can be presented. Option C. Initiate a transparent dialogue with key stakeholders, including the client and investors, to explain the situation, present the impact of the unforeseen conditions, and collaboratively explore options for addressing the cost overruns, such as scope adjustments or revised funding. Option D. Proceed with the project as planned, absorbing the cost overruns internally without informing stakeholders, with the expectation that future projects will compensate for the losses. Correct answer is B. Immediately implement cost-saving measures that may involve reducing the quality of certain non-critical materials and expediting certain construction phases, while deferring detailed communication with stakeholders until a revised budget can be presented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial pressures of a project with the long-term reputational and ethical obligations to stakeholders. The project is facing unexpected cost overruns, and there's a temptation to cut corners on quality or safety to meet budget targets. This directly impacts the trust and confidence of clients, investors, and the wider community, all of whom are critical stakeholders. Careful judgment is needed to navigate these competing demands without compromising Bouygues' core values and regulatory compliance. The correct approach, which involves transparent communication with stakeholders about the cost overruns and exploring collaborative solutions, represents best professional practice. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty and integrity, and regulatory expectations for clear and timely disclosure of material project information. By engaging stakeholders, Bouygues demonstrates accountability and fosters a partnership approach to problem solving, which can lead to more sustainable and mutually beneficial outcomes. This proactive engagement also mitigates the risk of future disputes or reputational damage that could arise from hidden issues or unilateral decisions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost reduction by compromising quality or safety would be professionally unacceptable. This would violate fundamental ethical duties to deliver work to agreed standards and to ensure the safety of all involved. From a regulatory perspective, such actions could lead to breaches of construction standards, health and safety regulations, and contractual obligations, resulting in significant penalties, legal action, and severe reputational harm. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying communication to stakeholders until a solution is fully formulated, also presents ethical and regulatory risks. While seemingly prudent, this delay can be interpreted as a lack of transparency and can erode trust if stakeholders later discover the extent of the problem was known but not shared. Regulatory frameworks often mandate timely disclosure of material information that could affect investment decisions or project viability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, Thoroughly assess the nature and extent of the problem, including its potential impact on all stakeholders and regulatory compliance. Second, identify all viable options for resolution, evaluating each against ethical principles, regulatory requirements, and long-term business objectives. Third, engage in open and honest communication with relevant stakeholders, presenting the situation and proposed solutions. Finally, document all decisions and communications meticulously to ensure accountability and provide a clear audit trail. Question 9. Which approach would be most effective in addressing a key stakeholder's resistance to a necessary project change, considering their significant influence and potential impact on project progress? Option A. Immediately concede to the stakeholder's demands to avoid further conflict and ensure their support. Option B. Actively engage the stakeholder to understand their specific concerns, present data-driven evidence of the change's benefits, and collaboratively develop mitigation strategies for their perceived risks. Option C. Proceed with the change as planned, assuming the stakeholder's objections are not critical to the project's overall success. Option D. Postpone any decision regarding the change until the stakeholder's concerns are less prominent or a new project manager takes over. The correct answer is B. Actively engage the stakeholder to understand their specific concerns, present data-driven evidence of the change's benefits, and collaboratively develop mitigation strategies for their perceived risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in project management where a key stakeholder, despite having a vested interest in the project's success, is resistant to a proposed change that is deemed essential for long-term viability. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate concerns and potential disruption for this stakeholder against the broader project objectives and the company's strategic direction. Ignoring the stakeholder's concerns could lead to project delays, increased costs, or even outright opposition, jeopardizing the project. Conversely, capitulating to their demands without proper justification could compromise the project's integrity and future success. Professional judgment is required to navigate this conflict by understanding the root cause of their resistance and finding a mutually acceptable path forward. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves actively engaging the stakeholder to understand the underlying reasons for their resistance. This means moving beyond a superficial understanding of their objections and delving into their specific concerns, potential impacts on their operations, and their perception of risk. By demonstrating empathy and a genuine willingness to listen, trust can be built. Subsequently, presenting data-driven evidence of the proposed change's benefits, addressing their specific concerns with tailored solutions or mitigation strategies, and highlighting how the change aligns with overall project and company goals is crucial. This approach aligns with ethical principles of transparency, fairness, and due diligence, ensuring that all parties are informed and their perspectives are considered. It also reflects best practices in stakeholder management, emphasizing collaboration and consensus building to achieve sustainable project outcomes. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the stakeholders' concerns outright and proceed with the change without further discussion. This demonstrates a lack of respect for their position and expertise, potentially alienating a crucial stakeholder and leading to active resistance, which can significantly derail the project. This approach fails to uphold the ethical principle of considering all relevant perspectives and can be seen as a breach of professional duty to manage stakeholder relationships effectively. Another incorrect approach is to concede to the stakeholders' demands without thoroughly evaluating the impact of their proposed alternative. This could lead to suboptimal project outcomes, increased costs, or the introduction of new risks that were not adequately assessed. Ethically, this approach fails to act in the best interest of the project and the organization as a whole, prioritizing immediate appeasement over long-term success and potentially violating the duty of care. A third incorrect approach is to delay the decision indefinitely, hoping the issue resolves itself. This creates uncertainty and can lead to project stagnation. It demonstrates a lack of decisive leadership and an unwillingness to confront challenges, which is unprofessional and can erode confidence among other stakeholders and the project team. This passive approach fails to meet the professional obligation to manage project risks and make timely, informed decisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to stakeholder management. This involves initial identification and analysis of all stakeholders, understanding their interests, influence, and potential impact on the project. When conflicts arise, The process should involve active listening, open communication, and a commitment to finding solutions that, where possible, satisfy multiple stakeholder needs while prioritizing project objectives. This requires a thorough understanding of the project's scope, objectives, and constraints, as well as the ability to articulate the rationale behind decisions clearly and persuasively. Professionals must be prepared to justify their recommendations with data and evidence, demonstrating a commitment to best practices and ethical conduct. Question 10. The review process indicates that a new infrastructure project managed by Bouygues is facing a tight deadline for site preparation, which involves clearing a portion of land adjacent to a sensitive wetland area. The project manager is under pressure to begin immediate clearing to stay on schedule. However, preliminary environmental assessments suggest potential impacts on the wetland ecosystem, and local community groups have expressed concerns about noise and dust pollution. Which of the following actions best reflects a responsible and compliant approach to managing this situation from a stakeholder perspective? Option A. Halt all site preparation activities until a comprehensive, independent environmental impact study is completed and a formal public consultation process with local communities and environmental agencies has been fully concluded, even if this significantly delays the project. Option B. Inform local community groups and environmental agencies that site clearing will commence shortly, providing them with a brief summary of potential impacts and inviting them to submit written feedback within a short time frame. Option C. Immediately commence site clearing to meet the deadline, while planning to address any environmental concerns or community complaints that arise during the work. Option D. Proceed with initial site clearing in less sensitive areas, while simultaneously initiating a dialogue with local community representatives and environmental agencies to understand their concerns and collaboratively develop a mitigation plan for the wetland area. The correct answer is C. Immediately commence site clearing to meet the deadline, while planning to address any environmental concerns or community complaints that arise during the work. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a project manager's immediate need for project progress and the ethical obligation to ensure all stakeholders, particularly local communities, are adequately informed and consulted regarding potential environmental impacts. The Bouygues hiring assessment test, in its focus on ethical conduct and stakeholder engagement, emphasizes that short-term gains should never compromise long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance. The correct approach, which prioritizes transparent communication and proactive engagement with affected communities and environmental agencies before commencing disruptive work, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and the spirit of regulations that mandate environmental impact assessments and public consultation. It demonstrates a commitment to minimizing harm, fostering trust, and ensuring that project development proceeds with social and environmental legitimacy. This proactive stance also mitigates the risk of future legal challenges, project delays, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that proceeds with site preparation without adequate consultation or environmental assessment fails to uphold ethical standards and regulatory requirements. Such an approach risks violating environmental protection laws, which often mandate specific consultation periods and impact mitigation strategies. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the rights and well-being of local communities and the environment, potentially leading to significant social unrest, legal injunctions, and severe reputational damage for Bouygues. Another incorrect approach, which involves providing minimal, superficial information to stakeholders, is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a failure in genuine engagement and can be perceived as an attempt to circumvent consultation requirements, undermining trust and potentially leading to accusations of misleading practices. It fails to address legitimate concerns and can still result in significant project disruption and legal complications. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their potential interests and concerns. This should be followed by a thorough understanding of applicable regulatory requirements, including environmental impact assessment procedures and public consultation mandates. The next step involves developing a comprehensive communication and engagement plan that is transparent, timely, and addresses potential impacts. Finally, professionals must continuously monitor and adapt their approach based on stakeholder feedback and evolving circumstances, ensuring that ethical considerations and regulatory compliance remain paramount throughout the project lifecycle. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a critical project deadline is fast approaching, and a key supplier has unexpectedly failed to deliver a crucial component. The project manager is considering bypassing standard procurement protocols to expedite the acquisition of a replacement component from a less vetted supplier to meet the deadline. This decision needs to be made considering the Bouygues Group's commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach? Option A. Immediately engage the alternative supplier, prioritizing speed to meet the deadline and document the deviation from standard procedure retrospectively. Option B. Halt the project until the original supplier can fulfill their obligation, regardless of the deadline. Option C. Initiate an urgent, but still documented, review of alternative suppliers, seeking expedited approval for the most suitable option that meets essential quality and compliance standards, even if it means a slight delay. Option D. Inform senior management of the situation and request a waiver for standard procurement procedures to proceed with the alternative supplier. The correct answer is A. Immediately engage the alternative supplier, prioritizing speed to meet the deadline, and document the deviation from standard procedure retrospectively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project demands with long-term ethical and regulatory compliance. The project manager is under pressure to deliver, but deviating from established procurement procedures, even for seemingly minor reasons, can have significant consequences. The core of the challenge lies in resisting the temptation to take shortcuts that might appear efficient in the short term, but undermine the integrity of the decision-making process and expose the company to risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the Bouygues Group's Code of Ethics and Conduct, which emphasizes integrity, transparency, and compliance with all applicable laws and internal policies. Specifically, it upholds the principles of fair competition and due diligence in procurement, ensuring that all suppliers are evaluated objectively and that decisions are based on merit rather than expediency. This approach safeguards the company from potential legal challenges, reputational damage, and financial impropriety. It also fosters a culture of accountability and ethical conduct within the project team. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over procedure would fail to uphold the Bouygues Group's commitment to fair business practices. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or corruption, violating ethical standards and potentially contravening anti-bribery and corruption regulations. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding without proper documentation, would create a lack of audit trail, making it impossible to demonstrate compliance or justify the decision if questioned. This undermines transparency and accountability. A third incorrect approach, involving informal agreements without formal approval, bypasses necessary risk assessments and oversight, exposing the company to unmanaged liabilities and potential breaches of contract. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly identifying the problem and the objectives. This involves understanding the constraints, including time pressures and resource limitations, but also recognizing the non-negotiable requirements of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The next step is to identify and evaluate all available options, considering their potential impact on project delivery, cost, quality, and crucially, ethical and legal standing. This evaluation should involve consulting relevant policies, seeking advice from legal or compliance departments when necessary, and considering the long-term implications of each choice. The chosen option should be the one that best aligns with the company's values and regulatory obligations, even if it requires more effort or time in the short term. Finally, documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action is essential for accountability and future reference. Question 12. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a minor material defect in a specific component of the building's facade, with a low but non-negligible potential for water ingress if left unaddressed. The project manager is under pressure to meet a tight construction deadline and has received informal assurance from a senior engineer that this specific component has historically performed well and is unlikely to cause issues. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Rely on the senior engineer's informal assurance and proceed with the project without further investigation or documentation of the identified risk. Option B. Delegate the decision of whether to address the risk to a junior site supervisor, assuming they will make the most cost-effective choice. Option C. Formally document the risk, conduct a detailed impact assessment, and develop a mitigation plan, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the schedule or budget. Option D. Immediately dismiss the risk as insignificant given the project's tight deadline and the engineer's experience, focusing resources on other more pressing issues. The correct answer is C. Formally document the risk, conduct a detailed impact assessment, and develop a mitigation plan, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the schedule or budget. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The project manager is under pressure to deliver, but ignoring an identified risk, even if seemingly minor, can lead to significant future consequences, including regulatory breaches, financial penalties, reputational damage, and potential harm. The decision-making framework must prioritize a structured, evidence-based approach over expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to a proactive risk management methodology, which is a cornerstone of responsible project management, and is often mandated by regulatory frameworks governing construction and engineering projects. This approach involves acknowledging the identified risk, assessing its potential impact and likelihood, and developing mitigation strategies. This aligns with principles of due diligence, foresight, and accountability, ensuring that potential issues are addressed before they escalate. It demonstrates a commitment to quality, safety, and ethical conduct, which are paramount in the Bouygues operational context. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over risk mitigation fails to acknowledge the potential for disproportionate future costs and liabilities. This can be seen as a breach of professional duty of care and potentially violates regulatory requirements that mandate risk assessment and management. Ignoring a documented risk, even if it appears low probability, can be interpreted as negligence. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single experienced individual, without formal assessment or documentation, bypasses established risk management protocols. This is professionally unsound as it lacks objectivity and can lead to biased decision-making. It also fails to create a traceable record of risk assessment and management, which is crucial for audits and accountability. A third incorrect approach that delegates the decision without proper oversight or clear guidance abdicates responsibility. While delegation is a management tool, it must be done with appropriate checks and balances. In this context, the project manager retains ultimate accountability for the project's risks and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly identifying and documenting all known risks. 2. Formally assessing the likelihood and impact of each risk. 3. Developing a range of potential mitigation strategies, considering cost, feasibility, and effectiveness. 4. Evaluating these strategies against project objectives, budget, timeline, and regulatory requirements. 5. Selecting the most appropriate strategy, which may involve accepting, mitigating, transferring, or avoiding the risk. 6. Documenting the decision and the rationale behind it. 7. Establishing a system for ongoing monitoring and review of identified risks and the effectiveness of mitigation measures. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical project deadline is at risk due to a minor, unforeseen technical issue. A proposed workaround, while not officially documented or approved, appears to resolve the issue quickly and would allow the project to stay on schedule. However, implementing this workaround bypasses a standard quality assurance check mandated by internal Bouygues guidelines. What is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager? Option A. Proceed with the workaround as it is the fastest way to meet the deadline, assuming the risk of non-compliance is minimal. Option B. Immediately escalate the issue and the proposed workaround to the company's compliance and quality assurance departments for review and guidance, even if it means a slight delay in implementing the solution. Option C. Instruct the technical team to implement the workaround without further consultation, emphasizing the urgency of the deadline. Option D. Ignore the quality assurance check for this specific instance, documenting the deviation internally without seeking external approval. Correct answer is B. Immediately escalate the issue and the proposed workaround to the company's compliance and quality assurance departments for review and guidance, even if it means a slight delay in implementing the solution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project pressures with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The project manager is faced with a situation where a deviation from standard procedure, while seemingly expediting progress, could expose the company to significant risks, including regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and potential safety issues. The core of the challenge lies in making a decision that prioritizes integrity and adherence to established frameworks over short-term gains. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to the Bouygues hiring assessment test's emphasis on robust decision-making frameworks, which inherently include risk management and ethical conduct. By escalating the issue to the relevant compliance department, the project manager is adhering to established governance structures designed to ensure that all decisions are made with full awareness of potential consequences and in alignment with regulatory requirements and company policy. This proactive step ensures that any deviation is properly assessed, documented, and approved or rejected through the appropriate channels, thereby mitigating risks and upholding professional standards. This aligns with the principle of due diligence and responsible management. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the deviation without proper authorization fails to acknowledge the importance of established procedures and the potential for unforeseen negative outcomes. This could be seen as a breach of internal company policy and potentially a violation of regulatory guidelines that mandate adherence to approved processes, especially in areas that could impact project integrity or safety. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the potential risks and hoping for the best, represents a dereliction of duty. It bypasses the fundamental responsibility of a project manager to identify, assess, and manage risks, which is a cornerstone of professional project management and a likely expectation within the Bouygues framework. This approach could lead to significant liabilities if the deviation results in problems. Finally, an approach that involves pressuring subordinates to implement the deviation without clear authorization or risk assessment is ethically unsound and creates a culture of noncompliance, potentially exposing individuals to undue pressure and the company to severe repercussions. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying the core issue and its potential implications. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, regulatory guidelines, and seeking advice from subject matter experts or compliance departments. The process should involve a thorough risk assessment, considering both the potential benefits of the proposed action and its potential negative consequences. Documentation of the decision-making process and the rationale behind the final choice is crucial for accountability and future reference. In situations of uncertainty or potential conflict between expediency and compliance, escalation to higher authority or specialized departments is a key step in responsible decision-making. Question 14. During the evaluation of a critical construction phase, a project manager discovers that a temporary support structure, essential for the next stage of work, has not yet received final sign-off from the structural engineer due to a backlog. The site supervisor urges immediate commencement, citing significant time pressure and the belief that the structure is good enough based on previous similar projects. The project manager is aware of the potential for delays if they wait for formal approval. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the work after obtaining a verbal confirmation from the site supervisor that the structure is safe and document this verbal approval. Option B. Delegate the final safety check of the temporary structure to a junior engineer on site to expedite the process. Option C. Rely on the site supervisor's experience and proceed with the work, assuming the structure is adequate based on past projects. Option D. Halt the immediate work phase until formal written approval from the structural engineer is received, even if it causes a project delay. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the work after obtaining a verbal confirmation from the site supervisor that the structure is safe, and document this verbal approval. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project needs with long-term compliance and ethical considerations. The pressure to deliver a project on time can lead to shortcuts that compromise safety or regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to identify potential risks and ensure that decisions are not solely driven by expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and adherence to established procedures, even if it introduces a temporary delay. This aligns with the Bouygues hiring assessment test's emphasis on responsible project management and ethical conduct. Specifically, it upholds the principle of ensuring all necessary approvals and safety checks are completed before proceeding, which is a fundamental requirement in construction and engineering to prevent accidents, legal liabilities, and reputational damage. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining client trust and demonstrating a commitment to quality and safety standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on expediting the project without proper verification of the structural integrity of the temporary support would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would violate fundamental engineering principles and potentially contravene health and safety regulations, leading to severe consequences such as structural collapse, injury, or fatalities. Another incorrect approach, which involves proceeding based on a verbal assurance from a junior team member without documented confirmation or independent verification, demonstrates a lack of due diligence. This bypasses essential quality control mechanisms and exposes the project to significant risks due to potential misinterpretations or oversights. Relying on past experience without current site-specific assessment is also a flawed approach, as site conditions can vary significantly, and established practices may not be adequate for novel or complex situations. This disregard for current, specific assessments can lead to unforeseen problems and noncompliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that involves clearly defining the problem and its potential impacts, gathering all relevant information, including technical data, regulatory requirements, and expert opinions, identifying and evaluating alternative solutions, considering the ethical and regulatory implications of each option, selecting the most appropriate course of action based on a comprehensive assessment of risks and benefits, and documenting the decision-making process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and legal obligations. Question 15. Compliance review shows a project team is facing a critical deadline for a new construction phase. A potential issue has been identified regarding the sourcing of a specific material, which may not fully meet the latest environmental certification standards mandated by local building regulations. The project manager is under significant pressure to proceed without delay. What is the most appropriate decision-making approach in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the material as planned, assuming the minor deviation from standards will not be detected or will be overlooked given the project's urgency. Option B. Inform the client about the potential issue and seek their approval to proceed with the material, shifting the responsibility for the compliance risk. Option C. Continue using the material while informally seeking clarification from a junior member of the compliance team to gauge their opinion on the severity of the issue. Option D. Immediately halt the use of the material and initiate a formal review process with the compliance department to identify alternative compliant materials, even if it causes a delay. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the use of the material and initiate a formal review process with the compliance department to identify alternative compliant materials, even if it causes a delay. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project deadlines with long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to deliver a project on time can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues. Careful judgment is required to ensure that expediency does not compromise integrity or lead to regulatory breaches. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and documented review of potential compliance risks before proceeding. This aligns with the Bouygues hiring assessment test's emphasis on a structured decision-making framework that incorporates risk assessment and adherence to established procedures. By seeking clarification and engaging with the compliance department, the individual demonstrates a commitment to upholding regulatory standards and ethical conduct, which is a cornerstone of professional responsibility in any regulated industry. This proactive stance mitigates potential future liabilities for both the individual and the company. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding without full understanding or documentation of the compliance implications would represent a failure to adhere to due diligence requirements. This could lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to bypass the compliance department or making assumptions about regulatory requirements, demonstrates a disregard for established internal controls and external regulations. This not only creates a risk of noncompliance, but also undermines the company's compliance culture. A third incorrect approach, which might involve delaying the project indefinitely due to minor concerns, could be professionally detrimental by impacting project timelines and stakeholder expectations without a proportionate assessment of the risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, assessing potential risks, including regulatory and ethical ones, consulting relevant policies and experts, documenting the decision-making process, and implementing the chosen course of action with appropriate oversight. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and regulatory requirements. Question 16. The audit findings indicate a recurring pattern of project delays attributed to the adoption of novel, unproven technologies without adequate prior validation. In a current high-profile project, the project manager is proposing to integrate a new software system that promises significant efficiency gains, but has limited real-world deployment history within the industry. The project team is under considerable pressure to meet an aggressive client deadline. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to deciding whether to adopt this new software system? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive pilot study and risk assessment involving key technical experts and end users to thoroughly evaluate the software's performance, integration capabilities, and potential long-term implications before committing to full implementation. Option B. Implement the new software system on a limited, non-critical component of the project first to test its functionality, without a formal risk assessment or broader stakeholder consultation, to gain practical experience quickly. Option C. Proceed with the integration of the new software system as proposed by the project manager, given the urgency of the client deadline and the potential for efficiency gains, assuming the project manager's experience will mitigate any unforeseen issues. Option D. Seek immediate approval from senior management to adopt the new software, highlighting the potential efficiency gains and the project manager's confidence to expedite the decision-making process and meet the client's expectations. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive pilot study and risk assessment involving key technical experts and end users to thoroughly evaluate the software's performance, integration capabilities, and potential long-term implications before committing to full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate project pressures with the need for thorough due diligence and adherence to established decision-making frameworks. The pressure to proceed quickly, driven by potential client dissatisfaction or missed deadlines, can tempt individuals to bypass critical evaluation steps. This is particularly true when the proposed solution appears superficially viable. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen path is not only expedient, but also robust, compliant, and ethically sound, aligning with Bouygues' commitment to quality and integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates the proposed solution against established criteria, ensuring that all potential risks and benefits are considered before commitment. This aligns with Bouygues' internal guidelines for project management and decision-making, which emphasize a structured, evidence-based approach. By engaging relevant stakeholders and seeking expert input, it fosters collaboration and leverages collective knowledge, thereby mitigating the risk of overlooking critical factors. This methodical process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and contribute to the long-term success and reputation of the company, adhering to principles of good governance and responsible business conduct. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness fails to adequately assess the technical feasibility and potential downstream impacts of the proposed solution. This could lead to significant cost overruns, project delays, or even safety issues if the solution is not robust. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care owed to the client and stakeholders by not ensuring the best possible outcome. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on the project manager's intuition or past experience, without seeking broader input or objective validation, risks confirmation bias and overlooks potential blind spots. This can lead to suboptimal decisions and a failure to innovate or adapt to new challenges. It also neglects the importance of collaborative decision-making and knowledge sharing within the organization. A third incorrect approach that focuses only on the immediate cost savings without considering the long-term implications, such as maintenance, scalability, or environmental impact, demonstrates a myopic view. This can result in hidden costs and liabilities that outweigh the initial perceived benefits, failing to uphold the company's commitment to sustainable and responsible practices. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes defining the problem or opportunity clearly, gathering relevant information and data, identifying and evaluating alternative solutions based on predefined criteria, including feasibility, cost, risk, and alignment with strategic objectives, consulting with relevant stakeholders and experts, making a reasoned decision, implementing the chosen solution, and finally, monitoring and evaluating the outcome. This iterative process ensures that decisions are well considered, adaptable, and contribute to achieving desired results while upholding ethical and regulatory standards. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that a project manager is facing a critical decision regarding the procurement of a new software system. The vendor selected has a strong reputation, but a recent internal audit flagged a minor discrepancy in their compliance documentation related to data handling, which is not immediately resolvable. The project deadline is fast approaching, and delaying the decision could jeopardize the project's timeline and incur significant penalties. The project manager must decide whether to proceed with the vendor, seek an alternative, or request an extension. Option A. Request an immediate project extension from the client to allow for a more thorough investigation of the vendor's compliance documentation before making a decision. Option B. Proceed with the vendor, documenting the discrepancy and initiating a follow-up action plan to rectify it post-contract signing, while also informing relevant stakeholders of the potential risk. Option C. Immediately halt the procurement process and initiate a search for a new vendor to ensure full compliance, even if it means missing the project deadline. Option D. Proceed with the vendor without further investigation, assuming the discrepancy is minor and unlikely to cause significant issues, given the project's urgency. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the vendor, documenting the discrepancy and initiating a follow-up action plan to rectify it post-contract signing, while also informing relevant stakeholders of the potential risk. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate project demands and the need for thorough, compliant decision-making. The pressure to deliver quickly can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, potentially leading to regulatory breaches and ethical compromises. Careful judgment is required to balance project timelines with the imperative of adhering to the Bouygues hiring assessment test-specific regulatory framework and guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, evidence-based decision-making process aligned with the exam's stipulated regulatory framework. This involves systematically evaluating all relevant information, considering potential risks and impacts, and consulting appropriate internal or external guidance before committing to a course of action. This methodical approach ensures that decisions are not only effective but also compliant, minimizing legal and reputational exposure. It reflects a commitment to integrity and due diligence, core tenets expected in professional assessments. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over due diligence fails to adequately assess the implications of the decision within the Bouygues hiring assessment test's regulatory context. This could lead to overlooking critical compliance requirements or ethical considerations, resulting in a decision that is technically or legally unsound. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on personal experience or intuition, without referencing the specific regulatory framework, risks introducing bias and overlooking established best practices and legal obligations. This demonstrates a lack of rigor and a disregard for the structured decision-making expected in a professional setting. A third incorrect approach that seeks to delegate the decision without proper oversight or clear guidance abdicates responsibility and can lead to inconsistent or non-compliant outcomes, undermining accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and identifying all relevant constraints and objectives. This should be followed by gathering and analyzing all pertinent information, including specific regulatory requirements and internal policies. Potential solutions should then be generated and evaluated against these criteria, considering their feasibility, compliance, and ethical implications. The chosen solution should be implemented with appropriate monitoring and review to ensure its effectiveness and continued compliance. Question 18. The performance metrics show a consistent upward trend in emissions exceeding the permissible threshold for a key component of the manufacturing process, yet the project team is pushing to maintain the current production schedule to meet contractual deadlines. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Continue current production levels to meet contractual deadlines, assuming the exceedance is temporary and will self-correct. Option B. Initiate a formal environmental impact assessment to investigate the emissions trend, identify root causes and propose mitigation strategies, while communicating the findings and proposed actions to relevant stakeholders. Option C. Immediately halt all production activities until the emissions issue can be fully resolved, regardless of contractual obligations. Option D. Implement minor, ad hoc adjustments to the production process without a formal assessment, hoping to bring emissions within acceptable limits. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal environmental impact assessment to investigate the emissions trend, identify root causes, and propose mitigation strategies, while communicating the findings and proposed actions to relevant stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for project progress with the long-term implications of environmental impact. The company is under pressure to deliver a project on time, but the performance metrics indicate a potential deviation from environmental compliance standards. This creates a conflict between operational efficiency and regulatory adherence, demanding careful judgment to avoid both project delays and legal repercussions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and documented impact assessment before proceeding with potentially non-compliant activities. This aligns with the principles of responsible project management and environmental stewardship, which are often embedded in regulatory frameworks. By conducting a detailed assessment, the company can identify specific risks, explore mitigation strategies, and ensure that any deviation is justified, documented, and approved according to established procedures. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of future environmental damage, regulatory penalties, and reputational harm. It demonstrates a commitment to sustainable practices and adherence to the spirit and letter of environmental regulations. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the performance metrics and continuing with the current operational pace would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to acknowledge and investigate potential environmental noncompliance constitutes a direct breach of regulatory duty. It exposes the company to significant legal liabilities, including fines, sanctions, and potential project suspension. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for environmental protection and a prioritization of short-term gains over long-term sustainability and public well-being. Another incorrect approach, such as making superficial adjustments without a formal impact assessment, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach attempts to circumvent the rigorous process required for environmental compliance. It lacks the necessary documentation and justification, making it vulnerable to scrutiny by regulatory bodies. Ethically, it is deceptive, as it creates an illusion of compliance without genuine commitment or due diligence. This can lead to unforeseen environmental consequences and erode trust with stakeholders. A further incorrect approach, such as immediately halting all operations without a clear understanding of the problem, might seem cautious but can be professionally inefficient and potentially damaging to project timelines and stakeholder confidence. While it avoids immediate noncompliance, it fails to leverage the information from the performance metrics to identify specific issues and develop targeted solutions. This can lead to unnecessary delays and costs without addressing the root cause of the performance deviation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and investigate all performance data, especially indicators of potential noncompliance. 2. Initiate a formal impact assessment process to understand the nature and extent of the environmental concern. 3. Consult relevant environmental regulations and internal policies to guide the assessment and decision-making. 4. Develop and evaluate mitigation strategies to address identified environmental risks. 5. Document all findings, decisions, and actions taken. 6. Seek appropriate internal and external approvals before proceeding with any significant operational changes. 7. Maintain open communication with stakeholders regarding environmental performance and management strategies. Question 19. System analysis indicates that Bouygues is considering a significant infrastructure project involving the construction of a new high-speed rail line that will traverse a region known for its sensitive ecological habitats. To ensure compliance and responsible development, what is the most appropriate and professionally sound approach to understanding and managing the potential environmental consequences of this project? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) involving systematic identification, prediction, evaluation, and mitigation of potential environmental effects, engaging relevant experts and stakeholders. Option B. Assign the task of assessing environmental impacts to a junior project manager with limited environmental background, assuming they can gather sufficient information from online resources. Option C. Prioritize the economic advantages of the rail line and address environmental concerns only if they become significant obstacles during the construction phase. Option D. Rely on preliminary site observations and informal consultations with local environmental groups to gauge potential impacts. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) involving systematic identification, prediction, evaluation, and mitigation of potential environmental effects, engaging relevant experts and stakeholders. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent uncertainty and potential for significant disruption associated with a major infrastructure project. Need to assess the impact of a new high-speed rail line on existing ecological habitats requires a rigorous and objective approach. Failure to conduct a thorough impact assessment could lead to environmental damage, regulatory noncompliance, and significant reputational damage for Bouygues. The complexity arises from balancing project development needs with environmental protection obligations, demanding a systematic and evidence-based methodology. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) process. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory requirements for major infrastructure projects. An EIA systematically identifies, predicts, evaluates, and mitigates the environmental effects of a proposed development. It ensures that potential negative impacts are understood and addressed before construction begins, promoting sustainable development. This process is mandated by environmental legislation and is crucial for obtaining necessary permits and approvals, demonstrating corporate responsibility, and fostering public trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or preliminary site surveys without a structured assessment. This fails to meet the systematic requirements of an EIA, potentially overlooking critical environmental factors and leading to inadequate mitigation strategies. It represents a regulatory failure by not adhering to established environmental assessment protocols, and an ethical failure by not prioritizing a thorough understanding of potential harm. Another incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the economic benefits of the rail line, downplaying or ignoring potential environmental consequences. This demonstrates a significant ethical lapse by prioritizing profit over environmental stewardship, and a regulatory failure by neglecting the legal obligations to assess and mitigate environmental impacts. Such an approach can lead to severe penalties and long-term environmental degradation. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire impact assessment to a single, unqualified internal team member without external expertise or peer review. This lacks the necessary scientific rigor and objectivity required for a credible EIA. It is a professional failure that undermines the integrity of the assessment process and exposes the company to significant risks of noncompliance and inadequate environmental protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical consideration, and robust scientific methodology. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant legal and regulatory frameworks governing environmental impact assessments. 2. Establishing a clear scope for the assessment, defining the boundaries and key areas of investigation. 3. Assembling a multidisciplinary team with appropriate expertise. 4. Employing established EIA methodologies and data collection techniques. 5. Engaging with stakeholders, including regulatory bodies and affected communities. 6. Developing comprehensive mitigation and monitoring plans. 7. Ensuring independent review and validation of findings. This systematic approach ensures that all potential impacts are considered, risks are managed, and the project proceeds in an environmentally responsible manner. Question 20. Implementation of a new large-scale infrastructure project in a developing region requires a robust assessment of its potential environmental and social consequences. Given the tight project timeline and pressure from stakeholders to commence construction rapidly, which approach best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional responsibility? Option A. Undertake a limited environmental review focusing only on obvious ecological risks, while disregarding potential social impacts and community concerns to meet the deadline. Option B. Initiate construction immediately and commission an EIA only if significant environmental or social issues arise during the project's execution. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment EIA that includes thorough baseline studies, stakeholder consultations, and detailed mitigation plans, even if it means a slight adjustment to the initial construction schedule. Option D. Proceed with construction based on preliminary internal risk assessments, deferring a formal EIA until after initial site clearing and foundation work are completed. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment EIA that includes thorough baseline studies, stakeholder consultations, and detailed mitigation plans, even if it means a slight adjustment to the initial construction schedule. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving project deadlines and conducting a thorough, compliant impact assessment. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise regulatory adherence and ethical considerations. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for evaluating the potential environmental and social impacts of the proposed construction project. This aligns with the principles of sustainable development and responsible corporate citizenship, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory frameworks. Specifically, conducting a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment (EIA) before project commencement ensures that potential negative consequences are identified, mitigated, and managed proactively. This process is often mandated by national environmental legislation and international best practices, such as those promoted by the World Bank or IFC, which Bouygues, as a global entity, would be expected to adhere to. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency, stakeholder engagement, and minimizing harm, thereby reducing legal risks and enhancing the company's reputation. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with construction without a formal EIA, relying solely on internal risk assessments, fails to meet regulatory requirements. Many jurisdictions mandate EIA for projects of a certain scale or nature. Bypassing this process exposes the company to significant legal penalties, project delays due to stop work orders, and reputational damage. It also represents an ethical failure by not adequately considering the potential harm to the environment and local communities. Another incorrect approach, which is to conduct a superficial EIA that only addresses obvious environmental concerns and ignores social impacts, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the holistic nature of impact assessments. Social impacts, such as displacement of communities, impact on livelihoods, or cultural heritage, are often as critical as environmental ones and are frequently regulated. Ignoring them can lead to community opposition, legal challenges, and significant project disruption. A third incorrect approach, which is to delay the EIA until after construction has begun, is a clear violation of regulatory timelines and best practices. Impact assessments are designed to inform decision-making before irreversible actions are taken. Conducting one post-commencement renders the assessment largely ineffective in preventing negative impacts and can be seen as an attempt to circumvent regulatory scrutiny, leading to severe penalties and loss of public trust. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying all applicable regulatory requirements and legal obligations related to impact assessments. 2. Understanding the scope and potential impacts of the project, both environmental and social. 3. Engaging with relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies and affected communities, early in the process. 4. Allocating sufficient time and resources for a thorough and credible impact assessment. 5. Integrating the findings of the impact assessment into project planning and design to ensure mitigation measures are effectively implemented. 6. Maintaining transparency and documenting all stages of the assessment process.